100 years ago today, people said she couldn't do it. That's not a figure of speech. In the summer of 1926, skeptics on both sides of the Atlantic questioned whether a woman's body could survive what she was about to attempt. The cold, the currents, the sheer number of hours a human being would have to move through open water without rest. Some called it medically inadvisable. Some said it more plainly. A woman simply wasn't built for it. On August 6, 1926, a 20-year-old from New York City waded into the sea at Cap Gris-Nez, France, to prove exactly how wrong they were, not with words, but with 14.5 hours of open water between her and the coast of England. Her name was Gertrude Ederle. Everyone who loved her called her Trudy. She was born October 23, 1905, in New York City. The daughter of German immigrants, her father ran a butcher shop and delicatessen, the kind of small family business that built American neighborhoods one storefront at a time. Trudy grew up in the water, and by her teenage years it was clear she wasn't just good at swimming. She was extraordinary. At the 1924 Paris Olympics, she brought home a gold medal in relay and 2 individual bronzes. By the mid-1920s, she had held 29 world and American freestyle records at various points in her young career. She wasn't a long shot. She was, by any reasonable measure, one of the best swimmers in the world. But the English Channel didn't care about medals. The Channel had a reputation, and it was earned. 21 miles of open water between France and England, in a straight line, except nobody actually swims it in a straight line, because the currents don't allow it. Only 5 men had ever conquered it. No woman ever had. And so the English Channel sat there, a kind of unofficial line in the sand, an assumption dressed up as fact that this was a feat belonging to men alone. That was the wall Trudy Ederle set out to knock down, and the warnings were the excuse everyone had ready in case she failed. She almost did fail once. In 1925, Trudy made her first attempt at the Channel. Partway through the swim, she ran into trouble, and her trainer, fearing she was in real danger, had another swimmer pull her from the water. Trudy herself insisted afterward that she could have kept going, but the decision wasn't hers to make in that moment, and the attempt was over. It would have been easy to let that failure be the end of the story. Instead, it became the beginning of a new one. Ederle went back to the drawing board, and this time she trained differently. She switched trainers, working with Bill Burgess, a Channel swimmer himself who understood the water better than almost anyone alive. She refined her stroke for endurance instead of pure speed, and she prepared her body for something most people never think about: the cold. Channel water sits bone cold even in August, cold enough to steal the strength out of your limbs and shut a body down from the inside. So her team coated her, head to toe, in a thick layer of grease and lanolin, a slick armor against the sea. Picture it: a young woman standing on a beach in France, being smeared in grease before wading into cold water that most people wouldn't dare cross. That image alone should tell you everything about what she was about to endure. At roughly 7 in the morning on August 6, 1926, Gertrude Ederle walked into the surf at Cap Gris-Nez and started swimming toward England. Her father and sister rowed alongside her on a support boat, along with trainer Bill Burgess, calling out encouragement, feeding her, watching every stroke. The sea at first was almost gentle, calm water, steady rhythm, mile after mile ticking by beneath her arms. For a while it must have felt almost peaceful, deceptively so. Then the Channel began to show its teeth. Winds picked up. The currents that make this crossing so notoriously difficult started pulling her off course, and what should have been a 21-mile straight line stretched, mile by drifting mile, into something closer to 35 miles of actual swimming. Waves that had been small chop turned into real swells. And then came the jellyfish, stinging her again and again as she pushed through them. Each sting was a small, sharp reminder that the sea was not going to make this easy for her, not for one single stroke. Somewhere out in that gray water, hours in, with her arms burning and the swells tossing her support boat around beside her, there must have been a moment, maybe more than one, where quitting would have been not just understandable but expected. This was exactly the kind of moment skeptics had warned about. The kind of moment where a body reaches its limit, and a mind has to decide what to do about it. The seas got rougher still. At one point conditions turned bad enough that people on the boat began to genuinely worry. And somebody, watching her fight the current and the cold and the pain, called out to ask if she wanted to stop. As the story goes, Trudy's answer became legend on the spot. 2 words, "What for?" She kept swimming, stroke after stroke, the coast of England refusing to get any closer for what must have felt like an eternity. The grease was wearing thin against the cold. The jellyfish stings throbbed. Her arms had been moving for what was now approaching 14 hours, and still she did not stop. Finally, the chalk cliffs and the shoreline at Kingsdown, England, came into view, and then, at last, into reach. Gertrude Ederle staggered onto the sand 14 hours and 34 minutes after she'd started, the first woman in history to swim the English Channel. But here's the detail that turned her swim from a milestone into a legend. The existing record for anyone, man or woman, belonged to Enrique Turaboschi, who had crossed in 16 hours and 33 minutes back in 1923. Trudy didn't just match the men. She beat their best time by nearly 2 hours. The skeptics had warned that a woman's body couldn't endure the crossing. Instead, she didn't just endure it, she crossed it faster than every man who had ever done it. Word of what she'd done raced across the Atlantic ahead of her ship. By the time Gertrude Ederle sailed back into New York Harbor, the city was ready for her, sidewalks packed, windows crowded, people climbing onto rooftops just for a glimpse of the girl who'd beaten the sea. New York threw her a ticker-tape parade, and the city did not hold back. Estimates of the crowd run as high as 2 million people lining the streets of Manhattan, screaming, cheering, showering her with confetti and torn paper streaming down from every window above. President Calvin Coolidge called her America's best girl. It was one of the largest celebrations the city had ever thrown for anybody. Think about that. A 20-year-old girl from a butcher's family, welcomed home like she'd conquered the ocean itself. Because, in a very real sense, she had. There's one more part of her story worth knowing, because it tells you exactly what kind of person Gertrude Ederle turned out to be. That brutal, grinding swim likely worsened a hearing loss she'd struggled with since childhood, and over the following years, she gradually lost most of her hearing. It would have been easy for the woman who beat the English Channel to simply enjoy her fame and let that be enough. Instead, she spent much of the rest of her life teaching deaf children how to swim, passing on the very thing that had made her the most famous woman in America to kids the world might have overlooked. 100 years ago today, on August 6, 1926, Gertrude Ederle waded into the cold water off the coast of France carrying the weight of every warning, every doubt, every assumption about what a woman's body could or couldn't endure. 14 hours and 34 minutes and roughly 35 miles later, she walked onto an English beach having beaten not just the sea, but every man who had ever crossed it before her. 100 years on, that's still worth remembering. If you'd like more stories like hers, stick around. There are a lot of remarkable people worth knowing.